Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Open Door Technologies Client Webinar Series. This morning, we're going to be covering Spring Release Preview of Business Central for 2019. My name is Wendy Miller with Open Door, and our presenter today is Christian Roach with Open Door Technologies.
Thank you, Wendy. Hello, everybody. My name is Christian Roach. I'll be doing the presentation today on what's coming in the spring release of Business Central. So we're going to give you a bit of a preview on some of the exciting features and changes that'll be pushed out across our Business Central tenants sometime in April. Some of the information I'll be talking about as well, and I'll try to remember to highlight those. It's that it won't be in the spring release. It'll be shortly following that release. So I'll work to just kind of remind people. But just on your screen here is that you have a get your QR code scanner ready. So if any of you have your cell phones and you want to hyperlink to the release notes that I'll be referring to and summarizing and showing a few things about today, you'll be able to scan that QR code on the screen to get to that link. But again, it's pretty easy to Google to as well if you wanted to. So just with a general statement is that release notes describe functionality regarding the next major release, and that delivery timelines and anticipated functionality may change or be delayed as per Microsoft's policy. So again, we're showing you the preview of what is expected for the spring release and a few things shortly after. But again, Microsoft, of course, has the right to change what comes out in the final deployment based on QA or feedback or the like. There's that QR code. So if you'd like to go ahead and scan it. So what we're looking at are the release notes for April 2019, Business Central. Those can be found on docs.microsoft.com. But if you scan that code, it'll take you right to what I'm talking about today if you want to kind of review it and see for yourself or take it away and discuss those changes with your organization so they're ready. So the primary focus of the April release and what Microsoft has been working on is usability. So adding some additional features or functions to make it more streamlined or easier for folks to use. Performance, reliability, and scalability. And again, performance has been a big key of the April release. How do they make it more responsive for users when they're scrolling up and down, things like that, advancing through records. Separation of the core system and base app. That's not so much what we as the end user groups need to worry about, but what Microsoft has done is that they're removing from what we used to call CAL and separating out the base app and the system app into two separate programs. That way then they can update the system. So if they're finding something for performance-wise, that they can do that in a different release and maybe earlier than the base app, which includes, the general ledger functionality, for example. So they're able to update the core system separate from the GL, allowing them to kind of maybe be more responsive in system updates or making things better performance-wise. Another big focus and push has been data and the AI. So Microsoft, through our conferences that we attend and some of the feedback sessions that we're a part of in Seattle, is that AI is becoming a big thing for them, and they're wanting to incorporate a lot of, metrics and information and data to be able to help your businesses improve in maybe automating some things, and you'll see some of that in the coming releases as well. So our first section will just be application enhancements. So I'll kind of go through in summary and talk about the main changes that we're seeing and that we're excited about. I think I've pretty much got everything. There might be a few things that I haven't highlighted, but again, you can go back to those release notes to read the detail. But the first one is something that we're excited about. Name and description fields have been increased. That, to me, has been our #1 request probably for 20 years is, well, why is description in the name field only 50 characters? Well, we're excited to say that in April, that'll be extended to 100 characters. So this will include things like MasterCards, items, customers, vendors. So description and name fields are being extended, and those will be carried through, of course, documents, journals, and ledger entries. The physical count. So traditionally, it's always been a journal. So it's a worksheet type system and works like a journal entry where you would be suggesting what you want to count. It fills out a bunch of lines. You can then do filtering. You could do a report, run it for this location filtered, and then this location filtered, and then hand those count sheets to two separate individuals. Well, what they're doing is redesigning that to be more of a document concept. So then you'll have a header, as you see on the screen there. So a count identifier like a number, you can apply a description, then you can do some filtering and use your calculate line still to suggest the lines onto this document, print the report, hand the counters, and out they go. And then you're able to divide the work out kind of by document rather than a flat journal, which has been a challenge for some folks. So we're thinking that this will be an increase towards productivity and address some gaps in the current functionality. And so adding multiple items to a document. So from a sales document, you can go to the lines, manage, and select items, and then you get a list of the items. You can then tick on which items you want to add to your quote or your order. And then you can select OK, and it'll add it to that order. You still have to fill in the quantities, of course, things like that, maybe adjust prices if you wanted to change that. But it's a faster way to populate sales documents. The sales quote validity. So there's a setting in there now that you can kind of turn on as to when quotes expire. And so that's then set up in the sales and setup screen. So you can say that quotes are only valid for 30 days. You create a quote. Then there's a process that you can run to delete expired quotes as a batch process. That way then if a customer hasn't executed a quote, you can have that deleted and then recreate the quote if they come back with the updated pricing. You can control item creation prompt from lookups. So in the system, what currently kind of happens is on the fly as you're creating new inventory items, you're typing in a description and it's not found, or an item number's not found, it would prompt you automatically to say, hey, do you want to create this item? Well, you'll now be able to turn or decide whether you want that prompt on the lookups or not. So you can turn off that default behavior now on Business Central. Then, of course, the bill to customer dimensions are now copied to new jobs. So when you are creating a job, adding the bill to customer, it carries those dimensions over so you don't have to remember to add them uniquely to the job if applicable. So if you have a dimension on a customer such as business segment, then that business segment dimension would be also added to the job for your related postings through there. You can copy configuration templates. So that has been a manual process in Business Central today. So configuration templates are something that we use for applying that when you're using an automatic create an item prompt or something like that. That's where it knows what to suggest for your posting groups, for example. Or if you're creating a customer, you can apply a template to that customer to pre-fill country, posting group, payment terms, things like that. So it automates a bit of the setup of records. And as well as when you're importing records, you can also apply those templates. So now you can create multiples using this copy of a template. So you can merge customers and vendors and contacts, and it requires a specific permission set to be assigned. But what it does is once you've assigned that permission set, even a super user has to be assigned this express permission set to be allowed to do it. But then it'll light it up in your menu and you can say from this customer, I want to merge it with that customer. And then it gives you a bit of choice as to what you want to carry over from one versus another. For example, payment terms might be different between those two customers that you created. Well, then you can decide which one to create the combined record with. Shortcut dimensions are now always shown on journals and documents, which is exciting. So if you've added a shortcut dimension on your general ledger setup, it flows through the system. So no more having to personalize or right-click and then using the show column in the old days, but in Business Central, you have to actually personalize that screen or do a design or modify it through VS Code. But now it'll always show on all the journals and documents as a start. Bulk import of item pictures. So that has been another big thing if you're trying to maintain pictures within your items. But now what you can do is create a picture file. The name of the picture file has to be the number code that you've assigned in Nav. You zip them all up as a package, and then there's a process to import them in, and then it applies them. You can preview them and then apply them. Payment info has been added to the customer and vendor fact box. So in the vendor or customer list page, as you scroll up and down, it'll now show you what their last payment date and amount was. So it helps with just kind of understanding who's caught up and who's paid when. Swift code lookup, so that might be more applicable for our American friends, is that now you can at a bank level say, what Swift codes do you generally work with in your business? And then it becomes a lookup rather than a manual entry when applying it to a vendor's bank account information, as an example. That way, then it just avoids some keying errors. There's now a configure warehouse document selection. So what that allows us to do is you can now take your pick list report as an example and use custom layout. So now you have control of actually branding or doing some layout changes on your own with your warehouse documents, picks, putaways, things like that. Vendor invoice number has been added to related list pages in the vendor ledger entries and places like that, or the posted documents. So now you can identify what the vendor's invoice number was on your historical records. Time information is added to the common register. So those registers include GL register, item register, and job register. So now rather than just being able to identify the individual who posted the record, Harry posted this on this day, but now you can say, oh, it was 11 a.m. It was before lunch, or whatever you would like to be able to do when you're reviewing. When were things posted in your system? There's a new personalized capability within the UI, and I'll go into that in more detail later, but you can now edit the actions, and there's also the quick entry feature that you can manipulate on documents. So we'll talk about that in a little while as well. External document number has been transferred to posted records. Platform version added to the system information. So when we go to help, and again, I'll talk about this and demo it as well, is that there's a way to pull out from your system what the system app and the application app versions and build numbers are for us. So that's important if you're raising a support ticket with Open Door. And if we have to involve Microsoft, we need to be able to take and supply them with that information so they know what code base to be looking at. So we'll show you how to get that information in a demo too, and then you'll be able to see this laid out for you. Inventory setup has some new toggles. So the toggles are the on-off switches. So there's now a toggle to transfer item description to an item ledger entry. So traditionally, of course, you can decide on whether you want to, or now what you want as the description to be posted to a line, because it was more of a system-driven description oftentimes. Now you can actually say, hey, transfer the item description instead of some of the posting information if you choose. Improved where used for GL accounts. So now with the where used function, it considers all relevant areas as well as setup, but also in local versions and through extensions. So if there's an extension that is added, such as our rentals application, it'll allow us to be able to use the where used to see in the rental application where revenue is posted to for the rental app. So there's some of those kinds of things coming out. View document attachments from an application entry. So what we can do is we can do attachments and documents now, and then from the posted entry, such as customer or vendor ledger entries, or indeed the apply entries. So if you're doing a payment journal and you're pulling in entries that you're going to pay for a particular vendor, you could now look at the associated attachments that were posted with the invoice. Maybe that's important for an approver or a person who's producing the payment to go through and check for attachments and see that they have the backup before they pay. That would be a way that you could now use that. You can set up default ship to customer addresses. So the ship to has traditionally been a table there, and now you can assign a default one so that when you do your order, etc., then it'll drop that on for you. And that you can now schedule background jobs with a date formula. That's kind of cool. So within the job queue, when we talk about job queue, what that is it's an area that you can create a recurring task to, say, run a particular report or a process. Maybe you want to do the adjust inventory every Monday. Well, now you can do that based on a date formula. So if we said, for example, CM plus D1 in that formula box, then it would run at the beginning of each month. So the current month plus 1 day, it would be the first of every period. So that's just an exciting change for automation. We can change descriptions on GL entries, which is kind of exciting. So oftentimes what happens is when you post something, a user might say, oh, oops, I forgot, or hey, I wish I had, or I'd like to give some more information for auditors. Well, you can actually change that GL entry description now. What it does do, though, is it automatically will enforce and turn on change log. So you get a record of what the description was to what the description is after the change, along with who, when, and also now the time too. So that's kind of neat. So that you could actually review at the month end and maybe adjust or reclassify, or not reclassify, but also just change the description on something if you wanted to provide more information to the readers. Preview prepayment posting. So, and I don't know if everybody is aware, but in NAV 2017 and forward, you have something called preview posting. So remember to use that, but now they've added to the prepayments, whereby when you're going to post a prepayment, you can use that button and it'll give you an overview of what the journal entry will be. So if you ever are concerned or wondering, is your revenue mapped to the correct account for this related sales document? Well, you can use those prepayment or preview posting of that document and actually see and ensure that your journal entries are appropriate, and it's going to post them where you're expecting to. The other exciting one is resending remittance advices from journals and ledgers. This has been kind of a #1 issue for us, anyways, in our support that we're seeing, is that customers, after producing a payment journal, if you had an error or you just wanted to resend a remittance advice to a particular vendor, well, now you can go to the ledger and do so, or from the journal you can redo your distribution if there was an interruption or a problem with your email. So that's an exciting change as well. So our system enhancements. So now we're kind of talking about the base application in this case. So there's a new focus mode for document pages. So what we can use is a Control-Shift F12. And so there's a shortcut key for it too. But when you're in the line section, it basically blows out the lines to fill the whole screen, which is great for your data entry intensive processes, or doing a big sales invoice and you wish you had more line space. Well, now it's just a quick button using that one in the upper right here, or the Control-Shift F12, and then you can kind of go in and out of that mode and complete your document entry. Now, here's where I tried to start putting stars on things to try to remind myself, and I don't know if I was consistent enough, so I'll work to remind folks, but the notes and links are being enabled. So if you are a previous NAV 2000, whatever version, you would have been used to having a notes panel and outside links. So I could go to a customer card. I could do a link to that customer's website, or something like that, or a customer's portal, so I knew where to go for that customer. And then within notes, being able to say free-flowing notes on a customer record or an item record or the like. That is now being shown and pushed through the whole system again. They are advising that that is something that will follow the April release. We're seeing it being added to a number of the screens, but I think that they're working to replicate it throughout the entire system. And again, expecting it to be completed for final update after April, one of the minor releases. The next system enhancement we're going to talk about is saving and personalizing list views, which is pretty exciting. So this then again replicates what we could do within prior versions of Nav, but now extending it to the web. And just a minor comment here is that Microsoft, of course, is working hard to take what you can do in the traditional Windows client and getting that to be accessible and usable in the browser. So this is another one of those steps that they're making. So what we can do is we can show this filter pane, add the various fields that we wish, apply a filter, and then save it. So maybe I have my active customers, or in this case, they're basically saying what is out of stock in my main warehouse, and then you can get a quick view of those related items that they're showing. But again, this will be a minor update, and it should follow the spring release. A work date reminder. So many times, and it's probably traditionally within your controller or somebody who's working on a month end, that's when I typically see this being used regularly. It's that you can set your work date to be a different date than today. So oftentimes when I'm doing a month end, I may set my work date to be the 31st of the prior month, because I have to do all my final payments or some reclassification journals or the like. I'll set my work date to be last month, but then as I'm doing new entries, maybe I forget and I post them all as last month. Well, this is now just a reminder to say, hey, are you aware, or do you a reminder that the fact that you're not using today's date, and that you can switch or turn off that reminder. So it's hopefully just making it easier for your users to avoid accidentally posting something into the wrong date again after using a different work date. So you can adjust the work date, you can switch the work date today, or switch that notification off. System enhancements, including new shortcut keyboards, so new system enhancements including keyboard shortcuts. So slim and wide page mode, Control F12. Show and hide a fact box is Alt F2. You can add a new item using the Alt N instead of having to use the action for new. Previous and next is the Control left arrow and right arrow. So in a card page, you could move to the right or left using a keystroke now, which is an improvement. Now you'll notice here that they don't have the post shortcut key. So there is a feedback suggestion for some of those shortcuts that we commonly request. So I would encourage you to go into your Business Central and use that feedback feature. Go in, log in, and vote for those shortcut keys or some additional items that you wish that Business Central had, and Microsoft takes that under review. And that's what a large portion of these enhancements is the active community making recommendations and feedback submitted to Microsoft, and that's what they're using to improve the system and the application with. So again, we'd encourage you to check out that feedback and vote for what you want. System enhancements. So there's now an autosave indicator, and so for all of us heavy nav users, we've always been accustomed to the fact that if we leave a particular page, everything is saved, and the field that we had last tabbed or entered off. Well, now Microsoft has added a little indicator to advise people that it's saved. So it's more for those who are perhaps new to Business Central. and or do not have the same background as nav and are looking for a save button. So it's just an autosave indicator. There's improvements to scrolling in lists, making it snappier. So you can use your roller on your mouse, up, down, control, or page down, page up, things like that. And it's a lot more responsive. You don't see the little message at the bottom anymore saying fetching, and then it shows you the next list. It's much smoother, and it behaves a lot like a Windows client does today. The search results are being improved to allow for the entry of a word, but also now crawling across app source. So in April, when you type rental, or you wish to do a rental, it'll come up with our suggestion for our app, for example. So that's kind of interesting that they're exposing the app source through the Business Central app. The other thing that they're doing is putting in alternate keywords, because if you're new to Business Central or don't come with a nav background, you might think the customer should be a client. Well, if you type client, it'll suggest customer. If you type in product, it'll go back and say, oh, item is what you're looking for. So there's some improvements there as well in the cross-reference. Page inspection has been added. So this is an exciting feature for all of us technical folks, of course, when we're looking through or trying to understand, well, the record I see, we all know that there's fields that are not necessarily shown. Or if you're wanting to do some development, you'd like to be able to pass along or do a design spec for somebody and say, hey, I'd like this field added here, there, or the other way. Or you want to identify the table or the page number that you're dealing with if you're going to write some VS Code. Well, now you can use this page inspection, which is formally about this page. And if you're really old school, it was Zoom. So that's been added back to the browser as well. And then you can see table fields. You can also identify what's been extended in there, and including page filters if you're on a particular record or want to see, well, is it filtering out specific records? You can view that too. So it's great for troubleshooting data or feature configuration. All right, help and support. So what they've done is they've consolidated the help and support information into kind of one page, along with some learning references, your build numbers that I was alluding to, and I'll show you that page and what the new changes look like. Administration enhancements. We have manage upgrade schedule. So coming in April or shortly after on a few of these things, but the majority of these should be available in April. I'm excited to say that you'll now be able to say for your Business Central tenant, you'll get an advisement of the fact that you are scheduled. So they'll still auto schedule your tenant for update, but you can actually alter that. So not only can you put in the 6-hour window that you want Microsoft to have allowed to take your tenant down, so you have to provide a window, but you'll also be able to then say, I'd like to schedule or postpone this to a different day. Now, you will not be allowed to do that indefinitely, of course. So it's just something that you'll be able to have a bit more control over, including an on-demand option. So you'll actually be able to say, hey, upgrade now, and then it gets kind of queued up, of course, with all the folks in the various tenants around. But then it should happen within minutes, for example, that you can get an upgrade immediately, which is kind of neat. Monitoring and notifications are being improved, so admins will be able to subscribe and receive additional notifications of more events happening in their environments. The tenants or the admins will be able to use the admin center. So what you do is on your browser or at your Business Central browser on an online tenant, you can put a switch at the end /admin and get to this panel. But then you can also select the recipients who should receive notifications for the different event types. Right now it's one notification. So every time they do an upgrade, we can set in a list of users and they would all get the same email. But now you can say, oh, that upgrade notification needs to go to that individual, and maybe an error notification or something like that they'll light up needs to go to another user. So you'll be able to do that in the near future as well. So you can get updates in things such as up and coming upgrades, upgrade schedules, upgrade results, available extension upgrades. All right, then we have preview versions. So we're already into a release candidate for April. So post-April, they're expecting to make these release candidates accessible via the Sandbox environments. So if you're not aware of your Sandbox environment, what that is a way that if you just use the Alt Q or the search in Business Central, you can type the word Sandbox and you can get to this management of this environment. What a Sandbox is that you can create one, and then with our assistance through the administration panel, you can also make a copy of your existing production data as a Sandbox too. So now you have a way to have a test instance of your Business Central. So then you can refresh that whenever you need to. You can do development in the Sandbox. So you could actually build a tenant or your company unique VS Code if you want to extend or add a new table or add a new field. You can do all that in the Sandbox, test it, refresh it, and redo it as many times as you want. And when you're ready, deploy those changes into your production. But in our preview, in our version previews, we'll actually be able to take and load a release candidate or a future version of Business Central into that Sandbox and go through with your data, your extensions, to confirm that everything works appropriately. Or you'll be able to then load in an ISV, so such as our rentals. You'll be able to pull in the rentals for a future version of our rentals, try it out, make sure that it does what you need it or want it to do, and then be able to go back to your production and update and deploy that in there as well. Something else that'll be exciting is the ability to have multiple sandboxes. Now, there has always been a preview splash screen on those Sandbox instances, and so the word is coming down that your one sandbox will be free still, but for additional, they're going to begin charging for those additional sandboxes. So if you wanted one for a copy of your production data to do your internal support and testing requirements, and then another one to test future versions at the same time, then that would be an additional sandbox that you would have to license and pay for. So just so you're aware. And then they're enhancing the sandbox management too. So the environment overview will display additional information about that sandbox environment and provide the ability to upgrade your sandbox environments to preview versions of the future applications. And then administrators will also be able to upload and deploy a per tenant extension in the sandbox, just like you do with the production. That way then you can test, is my deployment process in my sandbox, from deployment to setup to new functionality that you're implementing, is it going to work the same way in production? Map that out, unit test it, test your process for deployment, and then do it live. So that'll be another advancement in there. And then enhanced extension management. So within there and the app source apps to allow them to keeping up to date, etc. You'll be able to get notifications as well as when new versions are available on our app source. Because presently, if you're not aware and have our rentals application, for example, your rentals app is not automatically updated when we push out a new app source version. So as a general comment on this call is that our rental version is 2.7 presently. The process to upgrade that is a little bit disconcerting, but it's that you uninstall and then you go back and then you reinstall from the app source and it'll put back in 2.7. By uninstalling, it does not remove the tables. It leaves it all underneath. Then when you get the new version, it recognizes that the old one was there, whatever that version was. It runs upgrade code embedded inside the app, brings those tables and functions forward, and then now you have 2.7. When the April 2019 update is pushed out to all the tenants, that will automatically upgrade our extension to be the latest one available for that spring release, because of course we have to update our app to accommodate for the 100 characters and things. So that's how that's going to work. But now with the enhanced extension management in April, we'll be able to advise you when there's new extension updates available from the store. And then the lifecycle services is more for our internal use, so I'm not going to cover that at this time. The intelligent cloud support. So we're excited to say that it appears within the April release or shortly after that your version of NAV 2018 will be available to migrate to the cloud using the intelligent cloud sync. So for all of those techie folks out there, that uses your Azure Data Factory and replicates your on-premise SQL database tables to the cloud Azure version. And then what you do is you work to create all of your customizations in your NAV 2008 version as extensions and deploying them as a package into your Sandbox as a test first, if you like, and then you would ultimately be affecting your production. And then through this sync process, once it comes back and confirms that it has 100% success, that could be your migration strategy from on-premise to cloud. So NAV 2018 and Business Central on-prem now support a cloud deployment now. So that's what we're excited to say. The other versions on there, just for your information, if you're a GP or an SL customer in 2018, R2 for a GP or 18CU1 for SL, then you can now turn on this cloud support or cloud sync as well. Just as a note is that is not intended necessarily to be a full go live, but rather for those versions, we would be considering that they are lighting up features or functions of the cloud version that you could then connect to Flow or Power BI or some of those other apps. But to talk to your partner, if you're looking to actually transition from GP or SL to Business Central, you may want to consider re-implementation just to ensure that all the various areas that this sync doesn't include would accommodate for what you want to go over. Although in the GP one, of course, they are now lighting up certain historical data. So we're expecting that they'll bring over posted customer records, for example. Maybe not the invoice detail, but the customer ledger entry would be created, for example. And the other thing that they're working on is foundations for the smart lists. It is not going to be fully released with a designer until October of 2019. So that's something just to kind of look forward to. But GP has a concept of smart lists, which really is a dynamic way to create your own page views of data and queries and linking things. They're extending that and building that out into Business Central. So they'll come out with some default ones we expect for April that you won't be able to modify. But then by October, we'll actually be able to modify existing or build and create new ones. So that'll be exciting that you can then use a page, kind of create some queries right inside Business Central and then export that to Excel for use as well. So a few highlights and performance improvements. Some of this is a little technical, but I thought I would just kind of show it and talk about it briefly. But the whole fact is that they are using telemetry. So what telemetry is that background information that they collect across all tenants. It is private. They don't include your specific name or customer account or vendor name or anything like that. But what they're doing is they're watching and logging common errors, what reports get ran, various things like that. And they use that telemetry across all of the Business Central deployments around the world to identify what are the bottlenecks, what are the most common error messages, what reports are used mainly that we should focus on improving. And out of that, we're excited to say in April that they're doing data compression for SQL. They're modifying or adding query hints to make things in SQL run faster under the hood. They've removed unnecessary companion table joins from SQL code. They've worked on improving the OData performance. So if you use that as part of your integration strategy or with Power BI, things like that, that those responses should be faster. And then also revising the RDLC report and improving performance in Sandbox tenants, because Sandbox tenants are by nature different than your production. So they've found that reports are running slower, and they've made improvements in the fact that just improving the report performance in your Sandbox environments for testing. They have also altered the thread dispatcher, so it prioritizes user interface over background tasks. Because what they were finding through the telemetry is that if a person was, posting a record or something, and then something had to happen in the system, or a job queue was about to fire, and it would kind of take over resources from the UI, pause that screen, it would complete the back end and then complete the user interface action. Well, they're saying, wait a minute, we should have the fastest response of the user. We can always background and queue that for a second if we have to. So that's what they're doing, putting more emphasis on your user interface. Then event runtime, there's improvements in rapid start. So if you're using rapid start for importing large lists and transferring data, well, that's now been improved, so it's faster yet, which is great. Power BI and application performance improvements throughout. So some of those things for perhaps the improvements around application was one of those things was a workflow subsystem has been improved. And then also the page queries. So on a role center where you have my customer, my vendor, my item list, or my account list, those added some overhead. Well, they've redesigned and improved the performance of those. So your role centers should load a bit faster, for example, and they should be more fluid of actions when you're scrolling up and down. So that's some of the overall general performance of the system improvements. All right, so for the next 10 minutes, we'll just kind of go through and do some demoing of Business Central and the April release. So I'm going to switch over to our Business Central at this time. I'll just have to refresh because I haven't been touched it for a few minutes here. All right, so what I'm going to do is, let's just kind of start with the top here. So if I go from our gear, you'll notice I have the personalized design inspect. That's where they've added the inspect. And then my settings, I'll just kind of show you the help first. So if I go to help, I use the question mark, help and support. And again, they've worked to kind of consolidate some of this information. So here's some online information, a link back to the community. We're looking for help. You can give that feedback. That's what I was talking about, going and saying, hey, these shortcuts I really would like to see is this, that, or the other thing. And then this is the other one that I'd like to key on. It's important that when raising a support ticket with Opendoor, that you include that platform and application version and build for us. You'll notice this is 14. So Business Central prior to April was 13. So this is the next major release. And then you can inspect pages and data and or last known errors and things from the related telemetry data. So they've worked to consolidate some of that stuff. Let's go into a customer. And if I open up the card, just to talk here is that we have the personalize. So within the personalize now, you'll notice that I can actually control actions. So that's where I could remove or move actions around in my panel if I wish. Again, the big thing to remember for the difference between personalization and design. Personalization is for me. I would need to use the design if I wanted to actually build an application that would affect all the users in my organization. Something else that's been changed here is the ability to change and show or show when collapsed. So that's in our nav versions that used to be additional or promoted and things like that. So now you can show under show more or show when collapsed, and that would kind of come up on the top then. And then exclude from quick entry. So now you have the capability, and design also has the capability to change the tabbing sequence. So if you exclude from quick data entry, then as you're tabbing between fields, it would skip that field. You'd have to click back to it or shift tab to get back to that field if you wanted to. So if you're thinking about your document entry process, that's where it can be greatly improved, because then as users are tabbing from the header, you can automatically take them to the description field, the quantity field, the price field, and then you're done. Next line, for example. So you can use your quick entry and edit that now, which is kind of exciting. So I'll just hit done. Here I could clear personalization if I've made changes for myself that I want to reset. If I go to design, I'll use the inspect. So if I use the inspect here first, this now shows me the related fields, table fields, in that particular table 18, and I can also now know what the card or the pages and whether there's any extension field or what the filter is being applied to that particular table is. And here, then now, what it also does is shows you all the fields, okay, that's behind the record. The other thing that's exciting is that if I was to go into design, there we go, and I'll go to field, you'll now notice that it's actually all the fields available now. That's the other thing that they've changed recently, is before it was only the pages that you could see on the page, not all the fields in behind. But now I can get to all the fields in the particular table too. So that's going to be really handy, especially with your pages, when you would be able to inspect and see that there's a field in behind that you really wish you could add to your page. Well, now your organization can do that. And then you would simply add that field, move it around, and then stop the designing. You can preview in phone mode, tablet mode, get it the way that you want, and then move on. Let's go to a list here. Okay, so from the list, I just wanted to show the filtering. Now this is something that exists now and not yet available, but let's just talk about it here. So with using your filter pane button, this is where you can get the related filters or add various fields that you wish to filter for. So if I was to choose to filter for only the blue location, in the near future, that's where then you'll be able to come up here and actually click and assist to save that view. But again, that will be post upgrade. Let's go to a sales order. And within a sales order, I'll just show you the view for the enhanced or the focus mode. So that's where now it's just kind of reduced the header information. I'm now working on my lines, Control Alt F12 or that button, and again I'm back to the header and I can complete that. So it's a nice way now to toggle back and forth from the related information. And maybe I'll just talk about the Sandbox, although that's not necessarily new, but I might as well just kind of give you a preview of what that is. So if I go to the search, Sandbox, oh, I guess because I'm using a release candidate installed online, it's not letting me do that. So the release candidate would let me go in and make a copy of my production and various stuff like that. I'll show you the GL entry thing. That was the other thing that I thought I should talk about in the past. So let me go there. So if I search for GL entry, GL register, go to the register. Oops, I ran the report, not the table. If I go to the archive, that's the posted records there. So if I maybe just click this creation date and sort back and forth, you can see that, I can see the postings here. And then if I was to drill down on a particular transaction to the general ledger, this is now where I can actually select to edit the list, and I could change the description for services. So if I change that, you'll notice that little auto saved and or saving and saved is completed. But now if I go to the change log, that's where you can get to see what has been revised. And so if I sort that up and down, so I'm just looking in the list for today's entry, you'll notice I changed something yesterday, but there's that entry from the invoice where I modified it from and to what I modified it to. So it automatically built that in by me editing the GL entry. So that's what happens when you modify a related GL entry. Something else that I'll show and talk about, oh yes, was the importing of items. So if I go item, import, or picture import, this is the new process for being able to review or apply pictures. So if I pick to choose, and I go to temp, because I had actually created one, I think, and here was my temp zip. There it is, BC import. All right, so now I pull that zip file in where I had file name 1000.jpg, 1001.jpg. It's loaded in these things and I can see them here. It shows me a size, so maybe I want to review or crunch down my sizes or whatnot with a pending. So maybe I'll show the item card. I can preview to say, is this the one I'm expecting to update? Yep. So now let's import those pictures. You'll notice it's complete. If I go back to this here and say, show me the item card, I can now see that I have my item pictures across my related entries. And that's kind of how the import works. The other one I'll show and talk about briefly is the warehouse report selections. So this is new. So now you have the ability to view and see the related report for put away, pick, movements, etc. So if I wanted to actually have control over my put away sheet, I can note that the report ID is 5751. And something that you can do in versions, I believe it was introduced in NAV 2016 and forward. So I'll just kind of note it or talk about it briefly. This has already existed in the past, but just for our custom layout. So what you can do is design or take the base report and actually make your own report layout for this. So if I said that I wanted to do a new one now, I want to make a copy of the related report that I've chosen here, being my 5751 report. Okay, and I'll pick up the RDLC report because I think it's an RDLC report. But now from this list here, I can go and say that for that report, I want to actually modify my layout. So if I update the layout, I can export a copy if I want to have a base. It's to be edit. I don't see the action. There's an option to edit these custom layouts, and I'm not sure why it's not giving me that action. And but just to kind of explain then what would happen is that you can then give it a name. You can actually run a editor. If it's RDLC, then you can use a SQL report designer and do your own changes to that report and then save it back. So you could add a new column of data that existed in the report. You could change colors, things like that. And then again with Word, then you can also modify that using the Word file or the Word editor, and then place fields, move them around, put in tables and the like too. And then you can assign that report back. So then if I was to go back to my warehouse report selections on that pick or put away, then I would actually be able to assign a custom layout selection to use. And then that's a way that you can map and use a custom report that you've made for one of those actions like invoicing, purchase orders, things like that. That's how you can actually edit without involving development your own reports, as long as the data set is correct. Well, we're coming up to time here, so 10:30. I'll just double check if there's any questions. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll wish you well for the day.